Hi, I'm Katharine Schwab. I'm an assistant managing editor at Forbes covering technology, and I'm here today with Sarah Guo, the founder of Conviction, a VC firm focused on AI, and her new partner, Mike Vernal. Sarah, Mike, thanks for joining.
Thanks,
Thanks for
Catherine.
having us.
So Sarah, congratulations on just raising your second fund, $230 million. That's really exciting. How are you thinking about the next stage of your firm and what you're looking for, your investment thesis for this new fund?
Thanks, Catherine. The founding premise of the firm was is sort of two things. One was that we are at the beginning of a decade plus technology revolution that would change a bunch of different industries and create a lot of opportunity to build a new venture firm. And the second was that a focused approach that allowed for deep understanding of a domain and work with a small number of really special entrepreneurs was actually increasingly uncommon. I think both of those things are still true and sort of more true today than they were 2 years ago. But the biggest change I'm excited about is to be working with Mike.
Yeah, so Mike, you've just come on as a partner after a number of years at Sequoia. So why did you decide to join Sarah, and why are you excited about AI right now?
I've had the pleasure of knowing Sarah for a very long time, and she's great. She's super smart and beloved by founders, and just the most well-connected and hardest working person in venture. So I'm grateful to be on board. And I think I mean, it sounds almost trite to say, but it is the kind of most interesting time in technology, I think, in my lifetime. I mean, I was alive during the dot-com bubble. That was pretty interesting too. But I think this notion that we are just have this accelerating, um, accelerating rate of progress in just like being able to convert electricity into intelligence is just it's just pretty crazy. And I was playing around with deep research earlier this week, and there's like some places where it's amazing. There's some places where it still has room to go, but it's clear we're on the precipice of this just like insane transformation. And I think a lot of interesting products are going to get built, and I just like working with people who build products.
Amazing. So it's just some of the investments, Sarah, that you've put money into. Cognition, Harvey, Mistral, Sierra, these are like some big names and have grown dramatically. So I'm curious what you're looking for when you're evaluating an AI company, especially because everyone and their mother wants to be an AI company right now. Like, what are the red flags? What are the green flags that you're really looking for?
Lots of things stay the same, right? I think you want people who are learning machines, who take a real point of view about what the future should look like, who can rally people to their cause, who I think just have real force of will. But if we focus on what is different, because those are like very enduring in terms of at least founders that Mike and I have tried to work with, um, the pace of change is very different now than it was a few years ago. The technology change doesn't happen evenly, right? Which is one reason we're so excited. It's also super disorienting, right? I think it is a different thing to be a entrepreneur in sort of an enterprise SaaS displacement market in like 2014 than it is to be an entrepreneur building something entirely new, attacking a services industry in 2025. And so the ability to like quickly understand what's happening from a capabilities perspective and make decisions about that and execute, I think feels different. I don't think that the answer is like only back research scientists. I think smart technologists and product people are going to build amazing things. We've already seen that in our own portfolio. But I think understanding the capability frontier and being able to make decisions about that as an entrepreneur is a new skill.
Yeah, Mike, do you want to jump in? Do you have any thoughts on kind of how
Yeah.
this moment changes the way you think about investing?
I mean, I think the most, uh, I think this is one of those waves where you want to either be at the very bottom or the very top. And what I mean by that is if you're one of the, um, if you are one of the top 20, top 30 people in the world, researchers in the world that is pushing forward the state of the art, most of them are at sort of leading labs right now. I think you can do very interesting things. I think otherwise, you kind of want to be at the application layer and you really want to have a deep understanding of the customer and you want to put all of your effort in sort of helping customers leverage the sort of the technology that is coming out at an accelerating pace. Um, I think like one of my litmus tests for companies as I'm thinking about them is like, are you happy or sad when the next foundation model comes out? Because if you were happy, like if you were anticipating progress, then I think you're probably well set up. If you are like building right at the boundary of what is possible today, and you spend a bunch of time doing that, in 3 months, that might all be obviated because the next model just does it for you. And so that's kind of what I mean by you want to be at the very top or the very bottom. You want to like love the customer and build down from the customer, or you want to be at one of the research labs. I think in between is tougher. So.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I noticed in your portfolio is that you're not an investor in like the big foundation model companies. So I'm curious in terms of like your view on the viability of those companies, especially because they have these just ridiculous valuations. It's just hard to even wrap your brain around them. And again, like reporting this morning that OpenAI is, raised another like crazy amount of money and is in the process of doing that right now. How do you think about your companies and like where they sit within the ecosystem in comparison to the like big startup giants? And why did you choose to kind of not go the foundation model route?
Well, I would start with like, I think it's a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity to like change the industries in the world that exist today, software and not with AI. And like, if you believe that, it's hard for me to believe that like one company or even a few companies captures all of that value. And so I definitely don't think of it as zero sum. We are in close partnership with a number of the leading labs, including being co-investors in several companies. I don't think I'm like prepared to comment on the valuation of the foundation model companies, except like we're fundamentally pretty early stage investors, and I admire the fact that Anthropic and OpenAI like they've existed for a while, right? Like people have been working on these ideas for a long time, and so Conviction is 2 years old. I think we're still in like inning two of the revolution. And so I'm really excited about the opportunity ahead, but it's mostly that we weren't there yet, honestly. In terms of the application layer, I just think that there are going to be very, very big companies focused on customers in a bunch of different domains. And the opportunity ahead for the labs is also pretty large.
So I'm curious to ask you a bit about the kind of open source versus closed source debate in AI, particularly given the big news about DeepSeek that kind of jolted everyone awake, perhaps earlier this month. And of course, you're an investor in Mistral, which is one of the big open source players. So, what's your thinking about how open source plays a role here? And where do you see those companies creating value for the entire ecosystem?
I think it's hard to be a software engineer and not like believe in the power of open source and
Yeah.
open ecosystems. It's just like a core understanding of modularity and the ability to reuse things, right? And so, I mean, I think a core premise for conviction is actually also like, investing in the community and in like value creation is as important as splitting the pie. And I don't mean that like we're not capitalists, it's in the name, but I think open source is very good for the ecosystem. I think it means that you will see faster innovation, you will see a drive toward efficiency eventually, like having the comp be zero or run it yourself is a very good competitive force for the industry. And As we've seen over the last month or so, investment in efficiency benefits everyone.
Yeah, Mike, I'm curious for your thoughts on the DeepSeek
Yeah.
kind of freak out moment, and if you think that was a bit overblown, or where your head's at on that.
I mean, I think it's been, if you just look at the trend of the technology industry over the past 50 years with Moore's law as kind of the exemplar, like if something is important, it gets better, faster, cheaper at like a pretty steady rate over a very long period of time. And I feel pretty confident that the same will be true of intelligence. I may get the facts wrong here, but I think the human brain runs on like dozens of watts, and a lot of these. I mean, we're talking about like gigawatt data centers to sort of replicate intelligence. It's clear, if you go back to the number of transistors on a chip in 1980 and you look at it today, there's probably like a million X increase. There's probably going to be a million X decrease in the cost of intelligence over the coming decades. And I think open source is just like one of the driving factors to that. But there's basically many trends that will come together, whether it's efficiency work, whether it's open source, whether it's new models, whether it's new architectures, to just drive the cost of intelligence down by probably, a factor of 100,000 or a million over 20 years. And I think that's like unquestionably a good thing.
Yeah. What do you make about the kind of political side of this? I mean, there's been so much talk. I mean, Andreessen talking about this being AI's Sputnik moment, and the kind of competitive drive with China. What's the kind of talk among your peers and your founders? Is that, again, hot air? Is that something that kind of drives people in the industry to like beat China?
I think the thing the US is great at is innovation and just like leading the way and just being sort of always being at the cutting edge. And I think that sort of has to continue to be the focus. Like we just have to continue to push the ball forward. I think hoping that we are the only ones to figure out how to make progress is foolhardy. But the best thing we can do is just sort of set up the environment and condition for people to continue to sort of innovate, research, just build more and more things. I think that's the way that you get companies like NVIDIA or OpenAI or Anthropic. So,
Sarah, any thoughts?
I would agree with that. And also, if you look at like one of the reasons, there are economic reasons and there are potentially like power and geopolitical reasons to care about, the United States being the leader in AI. On the latter front, historically, the U.S. advantage in technological superiority was not from the angle of protectionism. It was from the angle of doing things that were really hard, faster than other people, consistently. And that's been true across like a series of different technologies. And so I think, as Mike said, like we should invest in that.
Are there industries and areas right now that you think people are not talking about in terms of the way that AI is shaking them up, that you think there should be more focus on, or you see potential, founders like going into that space to shake things up?
well, I think my shorthand for where I think the most interesting opportunities at the application layer are is like high value information work that is software poor. So basically, people who are primarily doing knowledge work but are using generic tools like Microsoft Word or Excel or the like, as opposed to something more specialized. I think this is not a unique insight. I think like half of the VCs in the world have pored over the Bureau of Labor Statistics to look at all the job types and try to figure out, lawyers, accountants, what else. I think the thing, I met a company earlier this week that was kind of a co-pilot for a niche, like a job function I hadn't thought about. And I think that there is a bunch of there are a bunch of jobs out there that I think are non-obvious that are basically come down to exercising some mix of like exercising your brain or exercising your creativity. And I think there is the ability for products to supercharge that. And I think we will find those over the coming few years. I also think there's a lot. Consumer is really hard, but I think there's clearly going to be some interesting consumer products built from this stuff. And that is much more of like a trial and error process. But I feel confident that at least a couple of very interesting things will come out on the consumer front over the next couple of years.
I would probably add that AI is a force for like skill democratization, and I think it's more fruitful to look at AI from a technology perspective up or a skills perspective as like one abstraction up than like trying to do top-down market analyses in sort of a more traditional venture sense. In that, like if I take examples of certain things from our portfolio, there a lot of them are attacking things that were not software markets before. Companies like Sierra or Decagon, they're not going after Zendesk in particular or like ticketing systems for support. They're actually enabling companies to offer better customer experiences with automation and lower cost. If I look at companies like HeyGen in our portfolio, like one way you could look at that company is replacing the work of like SMB video production for recording like a talking head video as one beginning use case, right? And I don't think VCs would have said like, let's go after that super fragmented services market. But I think if you ask like, do people want to communicate more in video more cheaply, like 1,000 times more cheaply and with more convenience? Like the answer is yes, right? And so I think one of the most fun things right now is I think like flipping upside down the way you look at markets is fruitful now.
Well, of course, this is making me think about my own job as a journalist. And, there's certainly a lot of existential fear that in the media industry right now about what this is going to mean, particularly with the death of Google search potentially on the horizon, which is for most media companies one of the main sources of traffic. I'm just curious, this is a selfish question for myself, but what do you think is going to happen to the media ecosystem that was built on, Google search predominantly and social media kind of as a secondary factor? Where are we going?
Well, I think in a certain way, like the more I feel like I might be either like borrowing or citing some of like Ben Thompson at Stratechery's points here, but like I think the more you have abundance of content and like generated content and media, I think the more valuable and precious like the uniquely human content in media is. And so I definitely think that I have no idea how the industry will evolve, but clearly there's already been this kind of substackification of people going off and starting their own things. I think probably what happens is like individuals' creativity is amplified, and maybe the like infrastructure that supports that changes. So,
okay. It feels not super optimistic from where I'm sitting right now. I think it's a bit of a scary moment, and I think it'll be interesting to see how media in particular across a lot of different forms starts to kind of reckon with these shifts. So my last question, I'm curious how the way you use AI in your own personal life has kind of shifted over the last year or so.
For anything, my examples are probably trite, but like for anything that I'm trying to figure out, I actually just use like ChatGPT voice mode. And like I'm traveling for a board meeting right now, and I have a new suitcase, and I needed to figure out how to set the lock. And I just like tapped ChatGPT, and I was like, "How do I set the lock on this thing?" and it just kind of told me. It could be a little less chatty. It's very friendly, but it's like pretty amazing, and it's way better than uh, searching searching for that and ending up with like 5 ads and then 10 more sites that are like watch these 10 ads to learn how to set the lock on your suitcase. So I think I definitely feel a lot of my problem solving, how do I do X sort of queries moving towards these tools.
I think one thing I feel is just a sense of more leverage. Like I've never been much of a designer or a front end person at all, but we're throwing like a small party for our portfolio. We want to do posters for the party. Generally, what I would do is, and like we might still do this, is like ask some designer friends to do fun graphics for us. But like you can do so many things yourself now, right? Because it's a question of like curation and your ideas and like the iteration speed of being able to riff with Mike or Pranav or just a tool. And so I think the ability to do things yourself from a creation perspective is great.
Yeah, I certainly have noticed for myself too. It's starting to click for me like, oh, this is a better question to ask ChatGPT versus Google. And like I feel like I'm learning that distinction, which has been an interesting shift, and it is just really helpful. So yeah, thank you both so much for your time. Excited to see what new investments you're making over the next couple of years, and we'll talk soon.